All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today on registered apprenticeships for K-12 teachers. In introduction, we're really excited for you all to make the time to come out this afternoon to learn about this work. Before we begin and dive into this presentation, I actually have our good friend from NASDAQ, Jimmy Adams, who has been an incredible partner in this work, and he is going to share an update about a national convening that we are working on together. So, Jimmy?
Thank you, David. I appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity, and glad to be with you all this afternoon. And anytime I get a chance to be a part of these presentations, I always learn something. So I'm looking forward to that. Would like you all to know, anybody who wants to sign up, we are down to only 15 slots available for the national convening. We have 185 already signed up. It is going to be January 25th and 26th in San Antonio. We're going to have 3 general sessions, and then we will have breakout sessions that'll be 45 minutes each, 3 different breakout sessions, 5 different breakout sessions with 3 breakouts each during that time. And so we will have a total of 15 other just concurrent sessions from which you can choose. And the people that have been selected are those that are really on the front lines doing this work. They've got good experience and they've got good information to share. So if you want to join us, please sign up very soon. We knew that this would probably sell out, and it looks like that's going to happen within the next couple of weeks, if not the next couple of days. So, David, thank you for the time, and I will hand it back over to you.
All right. Thank you, Jimmy. We can't wait for the new year to get started and for that national convening on registered apprenticeships and teaching to commence. With that, if we're going to have a national convening, it'd be helpful for folks to learn more about registered apprenticeships and what they even are. Hopefully, we'll be able to convince a few folks that they might want to learn more after today's session. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. My name's David Donaldson with the National Center for Grow Your Own. And before we really get into this, one of the things that I've learned and have changed my presentations on this work is that when I ask 100 different districts for their definition on grow your own, tend to get 100 different answers. So we like to kind of start with establishing a shared definition of what we mean moving forward. So when we say grow your own, we're referring to a clear, articulated pathway for an aspiring educator to become a teacher for free, get paid to do so. And if you notice in our definition, there is nothing there about age. You could be talking about a 15, 25, 35, 45, 65-year-old. And at the same time, there's nothing in there about educational background, because we could be talking about somebody with a bachelor's degree, an associate's, no college at all, somebody in high school. The clear part here, the real thing I want folks to focus on, is that articulated pathway. We need to figure out a way that no matter who you are, where you're coming from, there is an opportunity and a clear articulated pathway for you to become a teacher. And so a little bit about our organization. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. I'm joined by my colleague Miles, and our other colleague Ben is out right now. But we come from the Tennessee Department of Education, where we created the first ever registered apprenticeship in teaching in the nation. We work now with states, districts, ed prep partners across the country. And then we had the honor of co-chairing along with Deans for Impact and AACTE to establish the national guidelines for registered apprenticeships and teaching as part of the Pathways Alliance. And so I'm going to give a little bit of the background of how we got to registered apprenticeships in Tennessee and then thus the nation. And so my background as a former teacher and a principal and head of talent at a district and state level. In this case, I'm going to talk about at the state level in Tennessee, dealing with educator shortages, just like everybody else in the country. But specifically, there was a few problems we were trying to address. Number one was we wanted to remove the financial barriers for those who wanted to become a teacher. Number two, over 20% of our vacancies throughout the entire state were made up of special education or English as a second language. So our most vulnerable students were the ones who were most likely to not have a high quality teacher. Third, I would say feel free to laugh, but we wanted to eliminate the concept of a first year teacher. How could we better prepare you to be more than day one ready? Number four, we had significant educator diversity issues. And number five, we had 42 different educator preparation providers in the state. Now that I don't work in government for the first time in over 15 years, I can say that not all were created equal in terms of quality. And at the same time, we had a lot of rural districts in Tennessee where the closest educator preparation provider could be well over an hour away. So that's what we referred to as EPP deserts. So based on this, what we ended up doing was launching a competitive grant, a grow your own grant for educator preparation providers. But in order to apply, you had to submit a letter of agreement with a district or a group of districts. And because we were funding this work at the state level, and to be clear, this can be funded at a district level as well, and we'll get into that later, we put in certain non-negotiables in place. And so those non-negotiables were aligned to the problems we had. Number one, if you were going to get this money, then it had to allow for aspiring educators to become a teacher for free and get paid to do so. So absolutely no money out of pocket for the aspiring teacher. Number two, everybody would graduate dual endorse in either special ed or English as a second language. Now, Tennessee was a local control state, so what that means is districts could pick with the first endorsement, hey, we're going to do middle school science or we're going to do high school math. Great, more power to you. But you have to add special ed or ESL to that. Number three, Tennessee policy was only 15 weeks of student teaching or clinical internship experience. So we said we're going to extend that to 2 years of seeking a bachelor's degree or minimum of 1 year of seeking a master's degree, because our big bet was more time under a master teacher who is the teacher of record would better prepare you to be a teacher of your own one day. Number four, districts had to select candidates more diverse than their current teacher workforce. And number five, very common today and very common then, but we just strongly encourage our university providers to offer their services online. That way, a high-performing institution like a Tennessee State or an Austin Peay State could serve people 3 to 4 hours away. And for us, this led to 65 of our districts, which represented well over half of the student population because we had Nashville and Memphis and Knoxville and Chattanooga all participating. They partnered with 14 different educator preparation providers to have just over 670 folks become a teacher for free and get paid to do so. Our all-in total costs came out to just under $10,000 per degree, meaning we invested a total of $6.5 million for those 670 folks. What we ended up seeing was candidates of more diverse backgrounds now going to higher quality educator preparation providers. That's based on this idea of 14 of the 42 being selected. And then specifically, due to the length of extending the clinical internship or student teaching experience, that's when I was approached and someone said, this kind of sounds like a registered apprenticeship. And at that time, I asked probably the most profound question I've ever asked in my career. And that was, what's a registered apprenticeship? I had never heard of the concept. But you'll see here, one thing about me is I don't take no for an answer. I can be pretty stubborn. And so over the course of 2 presidential administrations and 4 applications, so third time was not the charm, and 15 letters of support from a lot of our friends and partners, we were able to get the occupation of a K-12 teacher approved for registered apprenticeship. This just occurred less than 2 years ago, right around Thanksgiving of 2021. At the same time, once the occupation was approved, this meant any state could take advantage of this opportunity. And so the first program was approved, and I always want to give credit where credit is due, with the district named Clarksville-Montgomery County Schools, which is just north of Nashville. And they partnered with Austin Peay State University to establish the first K-12 teacher registered apprenticeship that was federally approved. And so this is the official definition of a registered apprenticeship. This definition comes directly from our great partners at the U.S. Department of Labor. But one of the things that we've noticed, I'm not going to read this out loud as you're reading it. One of the things that we've kind of noticed when we talk with our state, district, and ed prep partners is that this definition sometimes it's like, well, what does this really mean for me? Sometimes it kind of comes across as a registered apprenticeship is an apprenticeship that is registered. So that circular reasoning, we realize we might need to try to translate it into education speak. And so here's what we try to do. We try to say that, look, it's the best of both worlds. It's the idea that, yes, the apprentice is completing that degree or a post-bac licensure program so that they're getting that college courses and that experience and talking research and theory and discussing what occurred in their classrooms that day. But they're also getting that extensive hands-on experience under their mentor teacher, who is their teacher of record. And then most importantly, it is a earn and learn model. And so it's never made sense to me that traditionally folks pay tuition to a university to provide free labor to a school district, and we call that student teaching. If we really think about it, that alone has probably prevented hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of potential teachers solely due to a financial barrier that folks cannot afford to have no income while trying to become a teacher. And so the registered apprenticeship allows for that earn and learn model to take place to remove that barrier. The other thing that we want to talk about here is that as we continue pushing for, as you're thinking about definitions for registered apprenticeships as well, think about it as a phase two. This should not be in silos. This should not be a brand new thing. It should be thought of as a way of a phase two of a high quality grow your own or teacher residency type program. Meaning you should think about it as a way to help with the financial sustainability of high quality programs. One of the ways right now, as folks have less than a year left of ESSER funds, maybe registered apprenticeship can help with the financial sustainability. In an ideal case, it's actually going to help expand programs that exist so that more people can take advantage of them. I also just want to highlight that if we're not careful with this work, there's an opportunity for bad actors and low performing current operators to try to take advantage of registered apprenticeship funding. I'm going to get into it a little more, but I'll just say it now as well. Like, we have seen examples where, you know, if you're paying $40,000 to become a teacher, some of those programs are just going ahead and getting registered. If that's the case, that's not changing the game for who gets to become a teacher or how they are prepared. So we really strongly encourage states and districts to get out in front of this work, and we'll talk more about the role of the sponsor. And at the same time, our previous webinar we did was on EPP innovation, and we highlighted 5 or 6 deans that are able to actually have high quality and low cost. I think too often we sometimes associate lowering the cost, meaning we also have to lower the quality. That's absolutely not the case. So back to EPP costs. This goes back to that $40,000 comment. The only way this work, grow your own programs, teacher residency programs, and registered apprenticeships are going to able to scale and be sustainable is if we have affordable rates from ed prep providers. One of the things that we sometimes think a lot about as states and districts is, oh my goodness, the teacher shortages, woe is me. And yet enrollment is down nationally across ed prep providers over the last 10 years. So they need us just as much as we need them. One of the things that we did with our competitive grant process is, you know, we had 42 providers. Anybody could apply. And yet it's amazing how creative folks get. It's also amazing how many folks don't leverage Pell Grants or Teach Grants, or why are we being charged for football tickets or access to the athletic facilities when it's an online program. There's different ways that we have seen a lot of ed prep providers get innovative, even hiring staff at the district to teach certain classes as adjuncts. There's a lot of creativity that can take place here. The other thing too that I always want to push on here is that this work is very personal for me. My mom was literally my school cafeteria worker, and she also taught Sunday school and vacation Bible school for over 2 decades. I also happen to be the son of a West Point alum. And so if military and teaching are both forms of public service, and they are, yet we have West Point Naval Academy, maybe more relevant for this conversation, the GI Bill. Where's the GI Bill for teaching? And so when I think about this work, and I've shared earlier about the thousands, if not millions, of aspiring teachers that can't become one because of a financial barrier. When we talk to universities are going to have their enrollment. But now we're talking about the parents, the guardians, the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers like my mom, the parapros, the tutors, the folks that would make an excellent teacher. So it's actually a chance to add to their enrollment. These things can be a win-win. One of the lessons that we learned is that when we talk to most deans, not all deans, but most deans, they would say, hey, we don't control tuition. And that's factually true. So we learn to go to the provost and we say, hey, wouldn't you rather have 50% tuition for 40 students versus the current 100% you have for 10? And they got it every time. And so we have been able to replicate, and the work in Tennessee is shared, got it under $10,000 per degree. We have been able to replicate that in almost every place we've worked in except one thus far. And even in that one, it's $16,000 per degree, which is a great deal still. We actually set a new record with one of our clients, with Houston, in Houston, Texas, independent school district, $7,200 per degree. And that's even before they've accessed apprenticeship funding, which we'll get into in a second. And so it's amazing what can be done when you leverage these economies of scale. The other way to think about it too is that, I said $10,000 for what we did in Tennessee. If I had given 670 people $10,000 each and they had approached a university on their own, I highly doubt they ever would have gotten their degree for 10 grand. It is when you actually put that economies of scale and bundle it together that it allows for negotiations to be had. And it's a much more interesting and attractive for universities to consider. So one of the things that I always want to hit on is that a takeaway for folks today. Yes, we hope folks consider pursuing registered apprenticeship, but here's something that you can do right now, because the other thing, I'll just say it, make sure everybody hears it so that we're never accused of being a snake oil salesman. Registered apprenticeship funding in and of itself will never cover the full costs of getting your degree. Anyone who tells you that is lying to you. That's just a fact. That's not the kind of money we're looking at. You're usually looking at around $2,000 to $6,000 per apprentice per year. And yes, we even have exceptions to that. But for example, Pennsylvania, $3,000 per apprentice per year for 3 years. California, $3,500. And that's at their state funding level. But just want to make sure we say that up front. But as we're focusing on what can you do as a state, as a district, as a charter network, start with, if you even have one teacher vacancy, you can have a grow your own registered apprenticeship program. What I mean by that is, let's just say most districts budget at average teacher salary. So even if I went on the extremely low end of a $45,000 salary with fringe benefits, that's going to take you to $55,000, $60,000 per person. And so if you have a long-term sub in there, that's going to be $25,000 to $30,000. That differential alone of $60K minus $30K, that $30,000, why is that money not being used to pay for 2 paraprofessionals or 2 city or core members at $15,000 each to finish their degree or to get a post-bac license or a master's degree? That is an example right there of what someone can do immediately. Obviously, we have ESSER on here. Let's use it while we got it till September of 24. We have Title II funds up here that can be used. IDA and Title III, state general funds. We put state general funds a little lower because those are your most flexible funds. So usually districts like to save those for other tricky situations. Perkins 5, the U.S. Department of Ed, put out a great Dear Colleagues letter earlier this year that gave even more flexibility for Perkins 5 to be used on grow your own programs. One specific thing I'll highlight is it can pay for the first 2 years of a 2+2 program. That's something to look at. It also can be used for any grow your own of CTE teachers. It could pay for all 4 years in that scenario. We also have, if your high school programs, make sure if you have any type of high school grow your own program, it is a dual credit, dual enrollment, or early college program. if you're going to do anything in the high school space, make sure they are earning college credit while they're doing it. I want to hit back on number 4 really quick. If you're wondering why, or how did he say IDA in Title III? Well, this goes back to us requiring that dual endorsement piece. So if we were going to require folks to get dual endorsed in special ed, now I could pay for up to 50% of the program with my IDA funds. And if I was going to require English as a second language, now I could pay for up to 50% of it with Title III funds. Now we start to get a little creative as we're able to, what we say, braid different funding sources to help pay for these programs. So now we're talking about using money that in many cases is, even if you're ESSER funds, it's allocated, but it's not spent. And so you might want to relook at what are the things that we thought we'd be spending on that we haven't. Even with IDA and Title III, when I talk to the special ed and English as a second language, those teams, I would ask them, a lot of this money has been budgeted the same amount year after year for professional development, and we literally are developing fewer professionals due to the teacher shortages. So why am I paying the same amount for less services? What if I could use some of that money to get you certified teachers by training these folks? And that was something folks wanted to do and partner on. The other thing that we push really strong within any of this stuff is that if you have teacher vacancies, you likely have paraprofessional or educational assistant vacancies. So use those. This money and apprenticeship money, we do not recommend it goes for salaries. It should solely go for tuition, books, fees, and licensure assessments. Slot those folks in those paraprofessional educational assistant positions and work with your ed prep providers to develop a true gradual release model based on best practices in teacher residency work. Big fans of our friends at NCTR for the residency work that they promote. The other thing too is this is now an opportunity to be used as a marketing strategy for recruitment. Imagine a career changer come and work in our district, and in 1 year, 2 year, or 4 years, you can become a teacher here. That's because that career changer could be someone with a bachelor's, an associate's, or nothing at all. But it's an opportunity to now fill those paraprofessional educational assistant positions that would require us to start thinking of some of those roles in a transitory nature that, hey, some of these will not be career paraprofessionals, and that's okay. We need both kinds of people in this work. As already hit on, never pay market rate tuition. There's no need to do that with the shortages that exist. Leverage your economies of scale, and let's play that old game show, let's make a deal. You can get those rates lowered by talking to provosts, making sure universities are leveraging different funding sources and grant opportunities, as well as just by running that competitive grant. 2 other things I want to hit on really quick. Back to those high school programs, even if you are doing dual credit, dual enrollment, early college, do not take the thoughts and prayers approach for when they leave you. There are too many high school programs that have done an excellent job while they're in high school, but then they take the thoughts and prayers approach that they're going to magically navigate financial aid, enrolling in the courses, frankly, finding a way to pay tuition to work for free in a school district based on traditional student teaching models. We got to make sure it goes back to clear articulated pathways. If you are a district or a charter network investing in your high schoolers, make sure you invest in them all the way through so that they come back to you as teachers. Got to have that articulated pathway. And then finally, we need to start talking about tuition investment, not tuition reimbursement. Many places have tuition reimbursement, but what I want to challenge folks on is that if you have an employee that's worked for you for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, what more investment do they need to make in you to show how loyal they are? And if they're a parent or a guardian, they're literally sending you their most important investment, their child. And so with that, let's, as a district or charter, invest in people on the front end. The other thing too is that traditionally when you're doing reimbursement, you might be paying market rate, or you might be paying just a standard whatever amount. We'll pay for up to this amount as long as you get an A or a B or 3.0. If you actually use that money and strategically group it together to use for a competitive grant, just like we talked about the savings and from having long-term subs with your vacant positions, use that money. Everybody has dollars they can work with. The point is I want people to walk away from a slide like this so that they can engage their CFOs, who they're usually worried about because they come off more as CF no's and turn those individuals into a CF yes, that there is a way forward. There is a way to proactively pay for this for folks to be able to become a teacher. And so in any apprenticeship program, there's going to be three main roles: the role of a sponsor, the role of an employer, and the role of a related instruction provider. These are all very simple terms once translated into education speak. And so the employer is always going to be the school district or the charter network. It's whoever is employing that individual. The related instruction provider is going to be the educator preparation provider, the entity that is providing the courses to train somebody to get that degree or to get that license. Now, the sponsor can technically be anybody. The sponsor could be the state, it could be the district, it could be the ed prep provider, it could be a nonprofit, it could be a for-profit. In states that, like a Texas, where you have educational service centers, that could be the sponsor, or in California, the County Office of Education. Now, to be clear, this is our opinion at National Center for Career Growth. We strongly recommend that the state education agency consider being the sponsor. In every place that we have worked in a state, the state has been the sponsor, and it's because it's the best way to assert quality control. As a former head of human capital, I oversaw ed prep providers. It was a way for me as the sponsor to ensure that the right providers were getting this funding so that we were preparing the best possible teachers. Now, to be clear, we do have districts and we do have ed prep providers we work with who are a sponsor. And in those cases, that was, the state was not taking action in this space. And frankly, we only have one loyalty, and that's to kids. And kids need teachers. And so we have seen it work in multiple different examples. But by far, the best examples are when it's a state education agency leading the work. In the case of districts, that's the second best example that we have seen. However, even some of those districts might, in the long run, prefer for a state to eventually step in so that the state can help them on the reporting and data compliance reports. That would make their lives a little easier. Once you have all your sponsor, your employer, and your related instruction provider, you will need to work with either a state apprenticeship agency or the U.S. Department of Labor to actually get the program registered. 33 states, I believe it is. It constantly changes upwards because more and more states are seeking this status. Are state apprenticeship agencies. And so you would go directly to that office and they can approve you. Otherwise, you will work with a regional officer at the U.S. Department of Labor. The key components to any registered apprenticeship are below. This idea of minimum of 2,000 hours of training. What that comes from is this idea of a traditional 50 weeks a year, 40 hours a week that somebody is working on a job to be prepared. We have been able to get it to be under 2,000 hours in multiple cases because, frankly, most education professionals, paraprofessionals or teachers, you're usually talking about a 9 to 10 month, contract. And so in those cases, we've been able to promote that it's one school year. So it's the equivalent of 1 year. It's just within education speak. There's also other ways to potentially work around this with what are known as time-based models, which would require a minimum of 2,000 hours. It's usually non-negotiable, but a competency base is where we've been able to have it where it can be under 2,000 hours in select cases, as long as it's modeled to the full school year. And frankly, if you're doing a 2-year program, it's somebody who has an associate's degree or equivalent of 60 credit hours, you're going to have no problem hitting 2,000 hours in that scenario. Number 2, the progressive wage schedule. This is actually quite simple. Just think about it as a step and lane schedule that most places have. And if you don't, then think about it as a cost of living adjustment. You got to be able to show that somebody in the apprenticeship program has the opportunity for an increase in wages over time. And so even if you're doing a 1-year program, it could be that you're first employed as a paraprofessional, or we have some places where they've actually created a teacher apprentice role. And then in year 2, you're now a teacher of record. So that's your salary changes just because of that. but we've had other cases where the teacher apprentice is an educational assistant. So they make, $20,000 in year one, and they make $21,000 in year two. And then upon completion, they're now a teacher making, $50,000. So we've seen different examples of this work based on already existing pay scales that districts may have. The related instruction, well, the related instruction is provided by the related instruction provider. It is literally just a copy and paste of the course and sequence that the university or the ed prep partner offers for folks to complete their program. Number 4, on the job competencies. This is, I like this stuff because this goes back to that best of both worlds. So yes, you are learning things in the college classroom or the EPP classroom, but you're also mastering competencies while completing the registered apprenticeship, and they're signed off on by your mentor, which we'll get into as known in labor speak as your journey worker. In some cases, in a lot of places we work in, the on-the-job competencies have been the INTAS standards for K-12 teacher, but also we've worked with states that have their own professional growth teaching standards, and we've used that. In some cases, they've used the teacher evaluation rubric, which they've used that as the baseline, and then worked off of it a little bit because naturally there's some aspects of it one cannot complete if they are not a teacher of record. But those are just some examples that can be used for on-the-job competencies. Number 5, just hit on this, but the apprentice journey worker arrangement. So making sure that the individual, the apprentice, has that mentor, the journey worker, who normally it's going to be the teacher of record in that classroom. I want to be clear that we've worked with districts and even union representatives to say, hey, like there's options here. If you have a current teacher of record who enjoys having the candidate in their classroom and mentoring them, but does not want to personally be held accountable for or responsible for determining that person's fate, which makes a ton of sense, then in that case, it could be the assistant principal or the principal, whoever the authority person is in that school that is allowed to actually issue teacher evaluations. We've seen combos done like that as well. So I just want to make sure I say that for the purpose of flexibility and being adaptable. And then a fair and transparent apprentice selection. I think that's really important, and really appreciate the U.S. Department of Labor having that, as well as the affirmative action plan requirement in there. One of the things that, with this work is you want to make sure that everybody knows very openly what are the steps to be able to be considered for this program. And so the sponsor is able to outline, if you are interested in being an apprentice, these are the steps you have to do. It's just this idea that it's very clear and transparent. And at the same time, they also are responsible, the sponsor, for demonstrating over time of the apprentices, what are their backgrounds? Are we making sure that there's no discrimination and that we have a good mix of folks participating, being able to take access into these programs, which I think is a very important thing as we look to address teacher shortages. One of the reasons we're excited by the momentum, as of September 23, now 23 states have a registered apprenticeship in teaching. Just based on my conversations with our state network, which I'm about to hit on, I know that number is actually higher now, but we wait for USDOL or USDOE confirmation on that information. Also, earlier this year, there was the SAFE grant, the State Apprenticeship Expansion Formula grant, that actually showed 35 of 45 states that applied were interested in pursuing K-12 teacher apprenticeships. And there is no doubt of that excitement or growth, as we'll see in the next slide, where in August of last year, our organization, the National Center of Grow Your Own, launched the National Registered Apprenticeship and Teaching Network. We started with 7 states. These are the original 7 members in August of last year. And as of, well, technically last week, we're at 26 states plus Washington, D.C. The reason I say last week is because since even last week, we've now added Kansas and Wisconsin, and we are very close to adding one other state that said yes today, but they're just waiting one last thing to sign off on. This network is completely free. There is absolutely no strings attached. There's a really good article on it earlier this year in the 74. But the whole point is, as somebody who comes from state work and district work, states listen to states, districts listen to districts. So we meet once every 4 to 6 weeks. Originally, we were only planned, I think, to meet a few times, 6 times, and we've already done our second extension. So we're now going to be extending through December of 24, which is really exciting. And in every session, I provide updates on the national landscape and what we're hearing and what we're seeing. But more importantly, in every session, a state presents on its work. And these meetings are completely closed to outside folks. So they're completely off the record so that states can ask those questions that they can't get answers to anywhere else. Because what's really tough, having done this work and created this work, is that oftentimes in government, there is a fear of failure and there's a fear of innovation because it can lead to failure if it's never been done before. And so all of these people in the state and district network, these are the implementers, these are the doers, these are the folks that are willing to take chances. And so I want them to be able to lean on one another, to ask those questions where they can't get answers for. And frankly, whether you're our folks in Delaware or our folks in a state as big as Texas, everybody can learn something from one another. And that's what's been really cool to see in this work and as it just continues to grow. We also have our district network, which you can see here, and we'll be adding to that very soon, which we're excited to announce. But we have districts that have 1,500 students, and we have the largest district in the nation, New York City Public Schools, as well as Miami-Dade and Houston. So it's a really cool to see the geographic diversity as well as rural, urban, and suburban. I'm very, very encouraged about the growth here. And as said earlier, states listen to states, but districts listen to districts. And I'd also just quickly highlight that one thing I'm really excited too about the district network is we have had districts join this network that their state was not doing teacher apprenticeship and has since now entered the arena. And so kudos to districts, just like in Tennessee, kudos to Clarksville, Montgomery for starting this work and inspiring us and saying, hey, we got something here. And so it always takes a trailblazer. And I think most states, and I say this really just preaching to myself, we do our best work when we listen to those on the ground that are actually dealing on the front lines. Yeah, this just wanted to highlight that media continues to cover this work. I think Miles put the article in the 74 in the chat, and there's been many other stories in the Washington Post and PBS NewsHour. Really excited to see the momentum grow. And then I think as I'm closing things out, and then we'll get into Q&A. So please, if anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll read them aloud and do our best to answer those that we can. Also, our contact information will be here in case anybody wants the PowerPoint deck. But this is our technical assistance process. And the reason I share it is because there's nothing proprietary about it. The only thing proprietary is probably that I've made more mistakes than anybody, thus have the most lessons learned. And so part of our goal is to help people start on second base, not home plate. Frankly, a lot of times when we get hired, it's because I always say, as a former chief talent officer, we have day jobs. I don't have to deal with teacher evaluations or licensure, professional development anymore. We get to be one-trick ponies, and we feel very blessed to be able to focus on this work. And so typically the model, whether it's state or district, it starts by identifying what are the needs due to retirement, resignations, and turnover. So what are the grade level and subject area endorsements that you are looking for? And then from there, who are the potential candidates that would make an excellent teacher? And I haven't said this yet. It's usually something I talk about in the very beginning, but there's one thing that I believe in this work, and that's you can't teach somebody to have a heart for kids. As a former principal, if you were to ask me who would be an excellent teacher, I could always name you 5 people right off the bat. It was often 2 parapros, a parent, a tutor, and a city or core member. And the thing is an educator preparation provider can train someone on special ed. They can train somebody on English. but you can't teach somebody to have a heart for kids. And I think, I don't know about you all, but I may have fallen asleep once or twice in a college lecture. So just because you have a doctorate in front of your name doesn't mean you know how to engage students, doesn't mean you have a passion for folks. Another thing uh, uh, is you'll never hear us say upskill. My mom did not need to be upskilled. She had the skill. What she didn't have was the financial means to get her degree. And so I think in a lot of our work, and as districts and states recruit folks, they know that these folks have the skill, will, and intelligence. They just need an opportunity to address the financial barrier. And so it's when you do identify these folks, you want to also ask, if you identified, hey, they make an excellent teacher, great. Do they then want to teach in the subject areas or grade levels that we need? They might be a great teacher. You might have to wait for them for a second cohort if you're not currently addressing subject areas that's where their passion lies. But once you've identified those folks and they align to the areas, they've expressed an interest in those areas, then you do an audit of their backgrounds to identify, do they have a bachelor's, an associate's, or nothing at all? Because that's ultimately going to inform your conversation with the CFO to identify, hey, we need funding and we need to work with procurement to create an RFP that's going to say, okay, in this RFP, we're looking to launch a grow your own program that is for a post-bachelor's pathway and a pre-bachelor's pathway, seeking for special ed and science are the two areas we're focusing on for this. And so you can articulate all those things in your competitive grant, no different than saying we're looking for folks to graduate dual endorse. Or we have clients now where we want to see how ed prep providers are going to train people in the science of reading, high quality instructional materials, or even culturally responsive pedagogy. So there's different elements. I think that's what's really cool is this work, any way you look at it, this work can reflect the values of your state, your district program. And I think that's really, really important in this work. So working with that CF no and turning him or her into a CF yes, you braid the different funding sources within the education side of things, those Title II, Title III, state general funds, ESSER, you name it. You launch that RFP. You do extensive engagement with universities. We do multiple sessions when we do that. We also have a Rolodex of universities from across the country that we share open RFPs that we've written for when states or districts are willing to entertain out-of-state providers. And once those providers are selected and partnerships are formed, then you work with the state apprenticeship agency or the U.S. Department of Labor to get that program registered. And that's where that paperwork on identifying the sponsor and establishing the on-the-job competencies and the selection criteria and all those things go into account. At the same time, we have plenty of states, districts, and ed prep providers that just hire us to do step 4. Hey, David, we already got a program. We love it. Everybody's happy. Great. We just need your help on the paperwork and figuring out how to translate these things so that it can get approved so that we can potentially access apprenticeship funding. And so with that, this is our contact info if we can ever be helpful. One of the things one thing that I'll say for now is one of the reasons we're doing this webinar is just to be I'll just be very direct, is I get a lot of emails daily asking to meet, and we just can't anymore. In 2022, and I'm not exaggerating here, did 270 meetings just on basically this version of a PowerPoint. And so now, because of the growth of our work, we need to dedicate our time and resources to our partners, our clients. And so we are going to start hosting these types of webinars on a 101 level moving forward for those. We want to help see this work scale. I want to be clear. We want to see it scale at quality. But this is our way. So for anybody that's emailed me that didn't get a reply, please know it's not intentional. I'm genuinely still trying to uncover all my emails, and eventually you will get a reply. But in the meantime, it's easier just to say, hey, everybody, come to one place and try to answer, try to hit this with one fell swoop. So with that, Miles, I think we can leave the screen up. It's fine. And I'm going to look at the Q&A for folks. So I'm going to do my best I'm going to read it out loud. So first question, for bachelor or teacher cert programs, what types of jobs do people have when they are part of a registered apprenticeship program? It's a great question. And Scott, since I know you, thanks for being here. Um, let me, part of our job is to tell you the options, but then we're also always going to tell you, here's what we recommend. So the options are that we have seen is we've seen people be substitute teachers in a registered apprenticeship. To be very direct, we've seen people be a teacher of record in a registered apprenticeship. That is typically when we see where it's frankly like a TFA. That could actually be a Teach for America or a program where you're on an emergency cert. We have seen folks get those programs registered. If the state allows you to have a bachelor's and be a teacher of record without going through a program, it is technically allowed. So I always want to preface that. But the most common that we see is a paraprofessional educational assistant it's using that position, but again, it is working with the EPP to make it more of a gradual release model. In some cases, in order to better codify that, we have seen districts create a brand new position. They're same salary as a para, but they are actually classifying it different as a teacher apprentice position. So we have seen that. So those are some of the options we've seen. The reason I don't recommend a substitute teacher is, to me, that is being a teacher of record. And if you have a teacher of record in there, and trust me, there's plenty of programs that have done a decent job in that space. But at the end of the day, the whole point of investing in people is for not just, to remove the financial barriers, but we want to retain them. And we do know the research shows that if you're going to throw somebody to the wolves, they're less likely to be retained than somebody that gets extensive training under that mentor teacher first. NCTR, again, has really good research in that space, and kudos to them. So we just want to kind of stress that part. But it is technically allowed in those other examples as well. Number two, so this is not completely free to potential teachers. Technically, that is correct. It is not necessarily completely free. However, every place we have worked in, it is free. And we will not work in a place if they are not committed to it being free. So I hope I get that might have been a little, my word might have been a little slippery there, but just because it's a registered apprenticeship. So this goes back to that example. If you're charging $40,000 per person and it's a registered apprentice, it's $40,000 tuition, that registered apprenticeship is getting someone a $2,000 to $6,000 discount. That person is still paying out of pocket for the rest of it. That, to me, defeats the entire purpose of this work. That is just putting lipstick on a pig and replicating what already exists. And for those who don't know me, I'm pretty direct and blunt, but it's important because this is about getting kids the teachers they need and deserve. And frankly, the whole point of creating this organization was to prove it is possible to become a teacher for free and get paid to do so. And so shout out to, a lot of our partners, whether we're talking in Delaware, in North Dakota, in Texas, with Houston Independent School District, Ector County, Midland ISD. We are seeing more and more folks committed to removing those financial barriers. And also, let me just say this. It is 100% possible for it to be free. And anybody who is committed to continuing to move in that direction, we want to support. I'm anti-analysis paralysis. At the same time, I am pro incremental progress because it is still progress. Too many times that's become a dirty word, incremental, and we just don't see it that way. Are we changing? Are things better today than they were yesterday? That is what matters most. But I just want to be clear, it is 100% possible for people to become a teacher for free and get paid to do so. And we have multiple examples to prove that. And so we're not going to say not to do that. How can we find out who a particular sponsor is for one of the districts in your network? Just email me, info@ncguio.org. All of that would be, public information anyway, or should be, or you could actually ask the district. I do want to just make sure, though, just because of that word choice in that response, just because you're a member of our state or district network does not necessarily yet mean you have a registered apprenticeship. When we first started, we wanted to make sure that we had folks who did have a program, but also folks who were committed to pursuing it. So that I just want to make sure I'm stating that there are examples where states or districts do not yet have one, but they are actively exploring and working on it. And we like that our network has folks that are advanced and folks that are beginning. And I think that's actually really important because those who are beginning can learn from the lessons learned from people like myself and other states. And frankly, states that have been doing this work can sometimes be inspired by the creative thinking that somebody is approaching this in a new light. So just want to make sure I'm being transparent about that. I want to question number, well, I don't know what number, but question. I want to confirm that school districts can register their teacher residency program as a teacher apprentice without the state having registered. That is correct. Yes. If your state education agency does not have a registered apprenticeship in teaching, no problem. You can still go directly to the U.S. Department of Labor, or you could go to your state apprenticeship agency. That's one thing that I really appreciate U.S. Department of Labor's perspective on apprenticeships. These are employer driven. And better way to say this, kids can't wait. Kids deserve teachers. If your state's dragging their feet, if your current EPP's dragging their feet, find a different EPP. If you as a district are dragging your feet, then I encourage an EPP to find other districts who are not, that. So yeah, that don't let that be a barrier. Frankly, there's of the 23 states in that slide that have a registered apprenticeship, I do not believe I'm exaggerating when I say 12 of those, the state education agency was not involved in, meaning there was that many, over 10 districts or EPPs that chose to lead the way. And I believe you're going to see the state get on board in all of those cases. All right. Next question. Can you talk about the process of adapting existing ed prep curriculum? How have existing programs done that thus far? So I'm going to, and there's more to this question. And so this person, feel free to contact me, but I'm going to answer it in a very simplistic way, which again, please email me if I'm not answering your question, but we have not, like when I say we work with ed prep providers and they literally copy and paste their course and sequence over, that's not an exaggeration. Like folks should not necessarily have to go to their and my apologies because I'm more of a state and district person, but you should not necessarily have to go to your Senate faculty and get approval for certain changes. Now, yes, a state or district that is putting money towards this may say, we want to see you go above and beyond. And what I mean by that is, okay, show me how you're training people in the science of reading, or if you don't currently have a year-long clinical internship, that may require some changes. But at the same time, here's just a very concrete example. In Tennessee, of those 42 EPPs, only 2 had a teacher residency program when I was there. And by launching the Grow Your Own grant, which really fed into the registered apprenticeship, it went from 2 to 14 because we required it to even be eligible for the grant moving forward. So sometimes that funding can really drive innovation. But I say all this to say that as an ed prep provider, most cases, you're not having to make structural changes that require internal approvals. Usually you can work with the system as is. But again, please feel free to message me, and I can even contact you to much smarter ed prep provider and deans in our network and stuff like that could answer that better. Are you familiar with sustainability teacher apprenticeship grant opportunities? So the best way I'm going to answer that, and I think basically like, how do we do this long term? Different ways of looking at this. So you already heard me say, look, we got to lower costs and we got to use the money we have and grade it differently. That's all accurate. With apprenticeship funding, yes, it is grant funding. I want to be very upfront with that. But here's some really encouraging things we've seen. I'm going to first start by saying, like, we took the Kevin Costner approach. If you, not Yellowstone, but Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. And so what I can say is that in less than 2 years, we have seen Florida's putting $5 million into registered apprenticeships and teaching, and they're going to be more. It's public. I just heard yesterday, because I guess it's public because I heard a state person say it, $10 million in Virginia. Nebraska, $1 million legislatively approved. Connecticut, their governor is putting pilot money into this. Delaware, they got some of the SAFE grant funding and they're using for a pilot. North Dakota, we got $3.7 million just in the SAFE competitive grant over the next 3 years. Plus, they have their base funding. North Dakota Department of Public Instruction was the only state education agency to get approved for the SAFE grant, and we partnered with them to write their application. And so my point is to say, and then you have that example of Pennsylvania does $3,000 per apprentice, California $3,500. I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but after I left in Tennessee, now I believe either 5 or 10% of all apprenticeship funding is reserved for the teacher occupation. My point is to say, in a very short period of time, we have seen folks put money into this. And I think this whole, if you build it, they will come, will require state legislators continuing to make this, build it into the state budget. I'd also just add that there's things like North Dakota also has $2 million for Grow Your Own. Maryland put $47 million into their Maryland Leads program for Grow Your Own. Iowa's put over 40 plus million. So there's a lot of other things too, where it might not yet be exclusively registered apprenticeship, but just kind of imagine Grow Your Own as an umbrella. And there's plenty other examples out there, but I think you're going to see more of this registered apprenticeship. The key here is that traditionally, all these funds that we first shared, they're all education funds. Now we also can access the same money that has been used historically to train plumbers, electricians, those who work in IT and the culinary arts can be braided. So it's a yes and, or it's for lack of a better term, bonus money to consider. I hope that helps. Reading, sorry, some of these questions I'm reading first just to make sure before I read them out loud. Yeah, okay. I got a really good question. It's a political question, and I'm just going to answer it because I appreciate someone just going there. I want to be clear on basically they're saying, hey, how have you worked with the right and the left to get this in spite of political divisions that some may have. So first off, I like to think that I did my part to unite the country. And so as you remember earlier, I said it took 4 applications to get this approved. Well, it took 2 presidential administrations as well. So I might be one of the only people in this country to have gotten President Trump and Biden to agree to something. And that was the denial of the application I wrote. It was definitely a character building experience to get it denied 3 separate times. And so I say all that to say that we've testified to multiple state houses, state senates, governor's offices, you name it. One thing that everybody wants is for kids to have teachers, high quality teachers, because we want kids to succeed. And so what we've noticed is that we do in certain places with, we might push more on the earn and learn aspect of the work. It's the pulling yourself up by the bootstrap. It's not free college. You're earning it. You're working for it, all those things. On the other side, we might push more of a code switching and say, hey, this is about expanding the pool of who gets to become a teacher and making sure we emphasize the benefits of educator diversity. The point is, though, the funding is there. And so it's about being a good steward of taxpayer dollars and government efficiency. It's also about leveraging science of reading. We want to make sure that we are saying certain things that work, but that are values of that place. You heard me say that earlier. This work can reflect the values of that state or district. So we also are very proud to have NEA and AFT as collaborators, and Ed Prep. We have deans. Again, it's going to take a village for us to do this work. Clarify how student internship could occur in a registered apprenticeship process. I also just want to recognize we're going to come up on time. I am happy to stay on this call for anybody whose question I have not answered. So I'm just going to keep going until there's no more questions. So by student internship, mean clinical internship or student teaching experience. It occurs over the course of the school year. At just no different than it should be, no different in our opinion as a residency, a teacher residency. So you're employed. We're saying use that paraprofessional educational assistant position. It's already vacant. It's already paid for with benefits. That way, any government investment is solely again going to tuition, books, and fees. Then That's between the district and the ed prep partner designing what that residency experience looks like. I'd be happy to connect you to, if, and I never want to assume anything, but if you're looking for like what are great residency models, happy to share resources from our partners about what that could look like. Can you share a little bit of what you've seen as far as coaching for the mentor? Oh, great. I love this question. Just to read it out loud again, really quick. Can you talk about mentorship or coaching for the mentor? So really quick, this was a failure of mine. One of the things that was taking place in Tennessee was aligning student teacher placements with teachers based on their student growth scores. There was a study that had been done that said, hey, when you gave that information to principals, here's your teachers that are highly effective based on student growth, versus no information in how they place student teacher placements. Those who were placed with folks who had a higher or that were aware of their student growth scores, those candidates ended up having a better experience. All these things. I think gonna butcher on who was the researcher. I want to say Springer or but from North Carolina, something like, or it might be at Michigan now. Anyway, I can find that later. But my point is to say, just because you have high student growth scores, like, I don't know about you all, but if someone talked to me the way they talk to elementary students, that would never work for me. That does not fit my personality. And so we did work on developing like a micro credential for adult coaching. But yes, that is something that absolutely is essential. In our work in Maryland, we run a community of practice there. There are districts that have coaching modules and, for folks that for induction, and they are sharing that with other districts for teacher apprenticeships, because it's the same concept as being a mentor to a new teacher. And so making sure that I do think it's important to invest in that so that you know about adult development and coaching. I think that's incredibly vital. Yeah. I also think it's important for the principal and assistant principal then to also ensure that the apprentice is having a good experience with their mentor. And that is part of that's an important part of this work. Question, can Title III and IDEA money be used by districts? Oh, sorry, the question there we go. Pay for college tuition for apprentices so long as they're in a SPED EL program. Correct, it can be, yes. The way we kind of viewed it too, and this, always say check with your attorneys, all these things. We're not attorneys, but when we paid the money from the state, we paid it directly to the ed prep provider. We didn't give them, it was not a scholarship to the individuals. It was the same as if we were paying for professional development. The rationale being is that avoided the person developing a tax burden because it was not a scholarship. It was I never got charged taxes for going through PD. And that's what we believe this is. This is professional development that leads to somebody being eligible to be a teacher. And so, yes, if our understanding was we could pay for up to 50% of the program. We also use Title III and IDA to pay for additional endorsements of current teachers. That was a different grow your own strategy that we did. But yes, if it was a dual endorsed program, we could pay for up to 50% of it with IDA if it was special ed, and then Title III if ESL. Are there current options with EPPs for secondary content areas for those working towards their bachelor's? Yes, we know we have plenty of examples of universities that are doing grow your own and registered apprenticeship programs for folks looking to become high school English teachers, math teachers, you name it. Some of the times, though, I don't know if this question's getting at that. What we've also seen some of these universities do, because of when courses are offered, they're more likely to partner with community colleges to get a lot of those liberal studies courses, because sometimes those traditional courses are only taught from 9 to 5 when the apprentices are working. And so that they found that the schools of ed, they're available to work nights and weekends or have, online programs, whatever it may be. But they've learned to partner with a lot of community colleges to make sure they're getting those prerequisites as well. We've seen that in some cases. I don't know if that's what your question was getting at as well, but just wanted to acknowledge that. How do pairs get the experience to attain all the competencies, especially when employment is tied to an IEP service? Yes, great question. So we are talking about non-special ed pairs in this case. You are correct. that there are paras literally written into an IEP. That is not what we're referring to here. We're referring to general ed paras or educational assistants. However, I would say that for a special ed paraprofessional, I do think you could still do a registered apprenticeship if they are to be a special ed teacher. I do think that would allow them to demonstrate the competencies, but otherwise you are correct. It would have to be more of a general paraprofessional educational assistant in order to demonstrate the competencies. You cannot follow a kid around all day and supporting them in the way they deserve and are legally obligated to be provided while trying to be an English teacher or math teacher. That would likely not work, to be direct on that. There's a question that just says, clarify again how an apprentice can become a teacher of record before passing content exams. That is my answer to that is just there are certain states that allow that. That's solely dependent. That has nothing to do with our beliefs or anything like that. There are just certain states that you are allowed to be on an interim certificate, an emergency cert, and you have to pass the licensure content assessment within X amount of years. That is in a lot of places in the country right now. We just believe in, we understand why that is. That's real. We're just saying don't let registered apprenticeship be used in that way either. Registered apprenticeship, the whole reason we created back in Tennessee for Grow Your Own work was to go above and beyond. It was supposed to be a different way to prepare people. Again, if we're going to invest our money in folks, we want them to be the brightest and best and long-term investment, which means long-term retention. What recommendations have you seen to make sure the apprentice has time to study and do coursework while also working full-time? Oh, great. Also, Josh, good to see you, man. Thanks for the question. That is a $1 million question, right? I think this goes back to, and we are seeing in very, very few cases, but we're starting to see it, where in registered apprenticeships, and Josh, you know this better than I do, we are seeing universities, innovative ones. Imagine it's a 3 credit hour course. They are giving 1 to 2 credit hours of that 3 credit hour course for experience demonstrated on the job by completing the on the job competencies. They're not treating the college courses as completely in isolation from what the individual is doing all day, every day. Yes, that is that, you know, some people refer to that as competency-based education. And yes, there's a fiscal issue that I think a lot of universities are trying to work through. Well, if I'm giving credit, but I'm not getting paid for it, how's my financial model work? I think there's still a lot to be worked on in that space. Our theme more, we're going to always push for that economies of scale, this idea of when you rather have 40 students for 50% tuition than the current 10 you have for 100. But that is something we have seen programs where, you know, they're taking some of their college courses are more loaded in the summer as well. They're making up time. So they're only maybe taking 1, maybe 2 courses during the actual K-12 school year. And in that case, yeah, it might be a 3-year apprenticeship in certain cases. So different ways we have seen things. We've also seen places where they've worked it out where they're only working 4 days a week. And then the 5th day, they're doing college courses. So different, all that stuff would have to be signed off, as you know, by the employer. But those are some different models that we have seen. I think what's important is this all goes back to that clear articulated pathway. And Josh, you couldn't be more right. You got to meet the person where they're at. So make sure it's with a user design format that meets that person where they're at with their responsibilities. If a state has a registered teacher apprenticeship, can a district still go and create their own registered teacher apprenticeship? This is the way I'll answer that. If it is a U.S. Department of Labor state, you absolutely can. That is absolutely, you can do that. In a state apprenticeship agency, it depends. That's the answer. So in the case of Tennessee, the answer was no, you cannot. Technically, it was a USDOL state, and now it's an SAA state. But I say all that to say that there was just an agreement that said anybody that comes wants to do a registered teacher apprenticeship in Tennessee, you will go through the Tennessee Department of Ed as a sponsor. And that's because that was my type A quality control coming out. But there are cases where, you know, at the end of the day, if we did have a situation where there is a state that was maybe was approaching this and wanting to limit who got to be it, well, and by that I mean a state education agency. And I understood the intentions, but the thing is that the State Department of Labor could not technically deny someone if their application dotted their I's and crossed their T's. You can't discriminate necessarily. And so that can play into it. And so um, the reason it kind of worked in Tennessee is like you could have gotten registered, but there'd be no money then for you because all the money we hosted and we offered anybody to go through us. So the short answer is it depends. Real answer is it's going to be case by case in some cases. Sorry, that was a lot of cases. Joe, oh, good to hear you, Joe. All right. Hello, David. School districts exploring using para apprenticeships to fill the funding gap and then moving those paras that past praxis onto teacher reps. Do you know any who have done this successfully? Yeah, so if I understand correctly, Joe, you're talking like some folks have done 2 years as a registered apprenticeship for paraprofessionals. And then after those 2 years, they then enter a registered apprenticeship for teachers. I would say probably the best example that I am aware of in that case is Iowa. They just joined our state network, and we've actually requested for them to present. So I'm looking forward to learning more about their work. I also want to shout out Washington State that has worked on having a para apprenticeship and then a teacher apprenticeship. And I know they're exploring different ways to look at that work for always continuous improvement. But Iowa's is within the last 2 years, and their governor put a lot of ESSER money into it. And I think that might be a place to look at for that example. And that's not to say there aren't other ones, but in the reason I would also just add, there's a lot of states that just don't have like a para license, so they don't need to do that. But in Iowa, I believe they do, and that's so they take like that 2-and-2 approach, you could say. All right. One question I'm just going to skip over because I can't, it's about, is there evaluation tools for experiential learning college credits? If you just want to email me, I can try to connect you to folks. I can't speak to that. That's not in my subject matter expertise, so I apologize. Oh, there's a question that if anybody is potentially interested in partnering with us, yes, we do work with folks. Feel free to contact me. Our email info@ncgyo or just David@ncgyo, and happy to have that conversation offline. Thanks for reaching out. Yeah. Ooh. Have you experienced universities banding together to resist the change in models, particularly when they hear there's an expectation they will have to reduce tuition? Look, I'll just do the one example because it was my lived experience. So 42 EPPs. The first time we ran the grant, it was for 2 million, 20 grants of 100K each, and we had 7 EPPs selected. I want to say maybe 9 applied, give or take. And what we saw so like 42 minus 7 or 442 minus 9, even like majority did not apply. That's just the facts. And there are certain ones who said they would never apply over their dead body. And then when we got phone calls from university presidents saying, hey, why was my university not selected? And when I told them, well, you can't select if you didn't apply, that created probably some very interesting conversations between some presidents and deans. But I think what I'd also push is that what we have seen more and more is the governor or the state superintendent using their bully pulpits has made a big difference in this work. And also, frankly, like the more we've done this work, we have found much more and more receptiveness from universities because, frankly, again, it goes back to enrollment has been down nationally over the last decade. So it's a mutual beneficial relationship. And those who are usually early adopters, they're the ones who are reaping the benefits. We have universities partners that have wait lists, which is incredible. All these people who say there's nobody wants to be a teacher, false. When you remove, yes, there's a lot of things we should raise salaries, we got to address working conditions, all those things can be true. And what I will say first thing is when you remove the financial barriers, there are people who want to become a teacher, people like my mom. So Yes, there will always be some pushback, but it's that tipping point. It went from 7 EPPs to 14 EPPs, and it just kept growing. So yes, there will be some resistance, but stay strong, push through, and if you have financial incentives, it makes all the difference. Because eventually, one university's enrollment is going to go up because you're sending them the apprentices, and others, will start to lose even more enrollment than they currently have. Oh, only 2 questions left. Thanks. Okay, to follow up, can the internship become a teacher of record for the registered apprenticeship? I think the best way to answer that is only in a state that allows that situation. And this all goes back to licensure policies and does the person have a bachelor's? Yes, there are examples of states that allow not a high school, sorry, a college senior to be a teacher of record. They haven't even completed their program yet. We do not recommend that, again, for the reasons we stated previously. But if a state allows that, then yes, it is acceptable in those cases. Again, not recommended, but acceptable, yes, based on that state's laws. The best way, I probably should have said this earlier, is the U.S. Department of Labor cannot supersede state laws. So if a state has a law, policy, or procedure, or creates a new pathway specifically to tie it to registered apprenticeship or for any other reason, then that's the law of the land. So if somebody then uses that law to then register for apprenticeship, they're allowed to do that. They are allowed to do that. All right, last question. I'd love to learn about effective promising models for teacher residencies at the undergraduate level. All the programs I'm familiar with are graduate level programs. Oh, great question. So what I would say is we had a recent webinar that highlighted different innovations, EPP innovations. We had 5 or 6 deans on there. Reach University was on there, as well as Dallas College, a community college they were the second ever registered apprenticeship. Austin P State, theirs is a residency program. Theirs is an undergrad. Yes, they also do, master's degrees as well. Prentice Chandler, the dean there, Sarah Delano in Dallas. But feel free to send me an email and can connect to the webinar and also just connect you to folks directly too, if that's ever useful. And with that, we are 17 minutes over. Thank you to the folks who stayed. Pretty awesome to talk about this work. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email us. I need water to drink, so I'm going to end this call. But the last thing I'll just say is we're going to be announcing quite a few new webinars for next month. Hopefully they will be out by next week. They have to be out by next week. But again, we want to keep spreading sense of possibility here. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your interest. And if we can ever be helpful, please reach out. Take care and have a good day, everybody.